the Adinavasis and disciples of the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism were held hostage in the police station. The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism himself came seeking the anticipatory bail, knowing very well that they would arrest him. And on June 11th, the chief minister had illegally ordered the arrest, the arbitrary and illegal arrest of the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, despite no crime being committed, and for the Adinam to be searched and seized, and all the temple property to be searched and seized, and the stealing of the Adinam. And at that time, they enforced an illegal curfew. And according to the search and seize and curfew enforcement, they imposed on the private property, not more than 4 could even stand and walk to each other anywhere in their own home. So in their own home, a family of 4 could not be together. And this was the IPC 144 illegal curfew that was imposed on the Adinam at that time. And here you can see the genocide by the state police media access and how the state persecuted the victims rather than taking the perpetrator of the crime path. The chief minister ordered for the monastery to be sealed after the initial attack by the media mafia nexus. And at that time, many disciples were arrested, and ultimately the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism himself was arrested, despite never committing any crime and only being the victim of an assassination attempt. And here you can see more media mafia telling lies and how orders the seal of the Nithyananda ashram and ordered the district administrator to work out plans to seize the temple land. So they used this opportunity to of Kailasa and the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism and ordered the regional commissioner to use a heavy hand and ordered the state police to enter and seize property. And not only that, you can see that that the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, here are more articles, right, showing how the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism was arrested and portraying him as the criminal in the situation rather than the victim, which was the actual reality of the situation. And here, an article in Tamil where it explains that they had actually intended to make the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism helpless, hopeless, and resourceless. And this article shows that explains that the Internal Affairs Minister, the Secretary of Interior of atheist state government of Tamil Nadu, announced that the government would take over private temple monastery complexes, the Adinam of the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism. So the intention was to not only put the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism behind bars, but to actually take the property owned by Kailasa and Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism. So on 11th and 12th of June, the search, seize, seal, and curfew was enforced on the Adinavasis and Kailasavasis in the Adi Kailasa Sadvijnapita without investigation, without following the law, without even needing to give any time to respond. Completely is an abuse of power. And you can see how many police actually entered the Adinam at that time. And nearly 700 police at that time. You can only see a few of them here, but nearly 700 policemen were ordered to enter the Adinam and seize temple property, steal the monastery, and enforce a curfew and displace hundreds of residents, and ultimately leave everybody feeling insecure and unsafe. And the superintendent of state police illegally raided the temple with 100 officers for several government departments. And here is the administrative unit of the temple monastery complex illegally sealed without any warning. Here is a photo of the superintendent of state police supervising this temple raid. And then on the 13th of June was the illegal arrest, not once, but twice. The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism was illegally arrested. The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism came to court for an anticipatory bail for a fabricated offense, and that too bailable. Surprisingly, it was adjourned the next day and deliberately leaving it open for the pre-planned arrest of the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism. And at that, legally arrest the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism and parade him before the media mafia and keep him in an undisclosed location without warning, without any justification or reason for arrest. They simply arrested him and took him to an undisclosed location. And here you can see how the police is manhandling Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, and how many police were ordered to arrest one innocent person who was simply trying to follow the law by seeking anticipatory bail, and how the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism was manhandled, abused, and illegally arrested on the spot without.
மீண்டும் போலீசாரால் கைது செய்யப்பட்டுள்ளார்.
The media mafia that was harassing and abusing, and 600 policemen were outside the court during this bail hearing. Despite the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism being completely nonviolent and completely cooperating during this time, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism was abused and manhandled by 600 policemen. And the policemen tried to strangle the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism right outside the court in broad daylight, in front of everybody, with the media, everybody watching, and no recourse was given, and no reprimand. The police were not reprimanded in any way for this crime. And here you can see the state superintendent of police, Anupam Agarwal, grabbing hold of the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism to pose for the mainstream media mafia as legitimize the off-the-grid illegal detainment, which is called protective custody in legal language. Our mainstream media aired this false news, claiming that the illegal arrest was related to the false rape allegations, and tried to project the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism as a criminal yet again. And here are, again, photos of the 600 policemen pushing Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism into a car and into an undisclosed location where neither his counsel nor disciples were given privy to any information about where he was being taken nor why he was being arrested. And here, again, more photos of this illegal arrest and how Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism taken to an undisclosed location. And here you can see the article showing that over 600 police personnel were stationed within the court premises in a two-pronged attack mode. The state on the chief mobilized the 600 battalion of paramilitary police force and fueled in 3 crore, that's $500,000, for the unlawful body arrest and parade of His Divine Holiness. So $500,000 of the state's money was used just to arrest the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism on a baseless charge and parade him throughout the city of Bangalore, which is considered the Silicon Valley of India, to falsely project him as a criminal. This attack was cost the state actually $500,000, but that was inconsequential for them because they had an intention to criminalize the Supreme Pontificate in the public eye. And here you can see that the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism is nearly being mob lynched by and strangulated by the crowd who were gathered to the police and the anti-Hindu forces who were gathered to arrest the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism. And this is one of the multiple assassination attempts at this time against the Supreme Pontiff. And here is more evidence how the police, the government actually deployed 600 police personnel and used a two-pronged attack mode for arresting illegally the Supreme Pontiff. And on the 14th of June, on the orders of the chief minister, as we stated before, 600 men, paramilitary forces, and additional forces were deployed to illegally arrest the Supreme Pontiff and then parade him throughout the city to showcase him as a big terrorist who had been arrested. And this was, again, $500,000 was spent on this. Public taxpayer money was spent on this. And this was not only to arrest him, but to use this as an opportunity to assassinate him through various attempts. And we will go into that a little bit more. And the state danced to the tunes of the anti-Hindu, anti-Guru terrorists through this shocking dehumanization of the Supreme Pontiff. You can see how he's being manhandled, despite not actually committing any crime. And the only crime was that he was a victim to so many assaults and assassination attempts. But that was completely disregarded by the state and the police and the media mafia. And here you can see some TV footage of the state-sponsored attack, the unlawful arrest of the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism on the 13th of June 2012. And then after the initial arrest, Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism actually received bail. But again, Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism was again imprisoned, again put back in jail. And this was the second unlawful arrest within the course of less than 2 days. And this is completely unheard of. Has anyone ever heard of any religious leader, any Supreme Pontiff, anyone being arrested illegally like this? And have you ever heard such a leader being arrested illegally twice on false allegations in 1 day? In 1 day, after getting bailed, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism was again put back into jail on completely baseless false allegations that were not even communicated to the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism or the Kailasvasi. And again, you can see that $500,000 was blown in 3 hours for the state-sponsored attack, where here 800 policemen were on duty, and this cost nearly $500,000 for this execution of this state-sponsored attack against the Supreme Pontiff. And you can see here that the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism was remanded in judicial custody and was being shifted to the Mysore jail for security reasons, was so-called claimed. And when they actually took the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism to an undisclosed location, they claimed it was for security reasons, and they employed over 600 policemen for this illegal arrest and detainment of the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism. And then on the 14th of June, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism was arrested, as we said, again, a second time, and off-grid, it was taken to an off-grid DC location after getting bail for the complaint made by Ajit. The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism was again arrested for a police filed by the police. And at this time, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism denied his lawyers, even though the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism humbly pleaded by himself in front of the district magistrate. He simply explained that I am not disturbing public peace, but if you feel that me being in here is going to disturb the public peace, I will stay away from thee. I will not have any presence. And despite not having committed any crime, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism was ready to contain the peace and ensure that the public peace was maintained despite not having actually disturbed the peace in any way. He was ready to cooperate with the police and the public and ensure the peace was maintained. And after bail, again, here you can see articles showing that as if the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism was a criminal and arrested multiple times, despite never committing a crime. These articles presented as if the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism is a criminal being arrested multiple times within a day and being forced into jail and being denied bail. And the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism was until the 15th of June and was not allowed to perform the daily religious ritual as the pontiff of the most ancient Adinam in the world, the Shamla Pita, Sadvikyan Pita, and Madurai Adi. And never before, even during the past 2,000 years, during the various invasions of India, has this sacred ritual been stopped until the day the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism was held illegally in police custody. And despite this, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism only decided to fast during this time and chose to be completely nonviolent and completely cooperate with the authorities at this time. And only when the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, the disciples of the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, decided to file a habeas corpus petition, was the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism released, and the illegal detention was granted bail by the police and judiciary. And now you'll understand exactly what happened in order to get the bail on 15th of June. On the 15th of June at 5:30 p.m., bail was secured for the release of the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism. And here you can see, again, these articles projecting as if the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism was a criminal who was being allowed to be let out of jail despite actually never committing any crime and completely being innocent, and only the victim in this situation, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, was projected in the media as a criminal. And this was a strategy to attack the roots and pillars of Hinduism. Major sections of society who are paradoxically today labeled as the vulnerable or weak sections of society are women, children, and monks or sannyasis. And in Hinduism, these are in fact the foundation pillars of the society.